Today's guest is respected rock guitarist Gary Pihl. With a career spanning over 50 years and known for his work with Sammy Hagar and Boston, he joins us to talk about this fascinating journey, plus the great new Alliance album, Before Our Eyes. Gary, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. So, looking forward to talking about the new Alliance album. It's a great one. Want to hear all about those songs and everything, but you have quite a storied back history. Obviously, you spent some time, formative years with Sammy Hagar, transitioned into Boston. So, some really, really good stuff there. But maybe my first question is, a simple one. What inspired you initially to pick up the guitar and become a professional musician?
I just always wanted to, just one of those things that you see that. And of course, a lot of guys say, oh, it was the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. No, before that, even I wanted to play guitar. So I don't know if it was the Everly Brothers or Dwayne Eddy or the Ventures, somebody like that inspired me. And I wanted to play guitar. And I talked my dad into buying me a cheap acoustic guitar. My grandmother showed me how to play it a little bit.
Oh,
And so of course my dad said, well, you should do whatever you want to do, but take lessons or go to school to learn how to do it, and that'll come back again in a few minutes. So I got to be a teenager. I said, yeah, I want to be in a band. One of the other guys in the band said, hey, there's this guy giving lessons in the next town over. We should all take lessons from him. He's so good. And we went down there to his studio in a music store, and we're taking lessons from this guy. And he was great. He was showing us how to play cool stuff. And he was in a band called the Warlocks. We went to go see his band play at the pizza parlor, Magoo's Pizza Parlor. And a few months later, they changed the name of the band to the Grateful Dead. And that was Jerry Garcia giving us lessons.
really? Is that so, huh? Yeah, because his famous guitar was the Warlock, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So that's it.
Wow.
So years later, I'm in high school, and my dad says, "Well, you should go to college." And I said, "Well, Dad, I just want to play rock and roll. They don't teach rock and roll in college." He said, "But they teach music, and so if you want a career in music, do that, do the best you can, but go to school." So he drove me over to the local college and made me enroll. And I'm thinking, "Oh boy, this is going to be boring," but it wasn't. I loved it, and it wasn't because the teachers were so hip, but
Right.
they loved what they were doing. It was just infectious. And I was in, of course, the regular theory classes, counterpoint, and those kind of things. But I was also in a couple of choirs, a big choir and then a chamber chorale. And one of the kids sitting next to me in the baritone section was Johnny Cola, who went on to play with Huey Lewis and the News. So
That's
you never
right.
know who you sit next to. So that's my advice to guys growing up. And, gee, I want to be a musician. What should I do? That's my advice that my dad gave me. Go to school to learn how to do it.
That's it. That's right. And you can have the best of both worlds, right? You learn on your own, you play with all your friends and your side bands, pizza parlors and the clubs, but you get that education formally. Well, that's some cool story about the Warlocks, especially. Gary, it's funny when we think Sammy Hagar, obviously most people think of him from Van Halen and his popular solo albums, but he had a very long career before, dating in the mid to late 70s, of course, Montrose, and then he went solo. You were with him for a long time, 1977 through 1984. And I want to touch base on some of those really good albums, but how did
Yeah.
you first connect with Sammy and eventually become part of his band?
Sure. So I was in a band. So this is the San Francisco Bay Area. We lived in North Bay, Petaluma, that area. I don't know if you're familiar with that area, but anyway, north of San Francisco. And we had heard that, so we had a band. We had two brothers in the band, Mitchell Froom and David Froom. Mitchell Froom has gone on to have a terrific career as a producer. He's done Paul McCartney, Sheryl Crow, Crowded House, Los
Hmm.
Lobos, Elvis Costello, on and on and on.
Wow.
So he was one of the brothers. So needless to say, he was a great musician, as was his brother. But we were looking for a singer, and we heard that Sammy had just left Montrose. So our manager somehow got his number, and Sammy said, "Well, I don't need a band. I've got a band, but I need to do a couple of gigs. Can I open for you guys?" And so he did. and saw us play and this and that. And then we'd been together for a few years and just couldn't find the singer. Although at one point we actually backed up Norman Greenbaum for a while, Spirit in the Sky. Uh,
Yes.
but it wasn't quite the music that we wanted to play. We were, more heavy kind of rock and stuff. And Norman was, the acoustic singer-songwriter kind of stuff. Anyway, so long story short, Sammy's looking for a guitar player. And our manager says, why don't you go try out for Sammy? And I said, well, okay, sure. So I go down to try out for Sammy's band. I'm there at the audition. And while I'm there, Sammy's manager calls and said, hey, there was a gig here coming up. It's 2 nights. It was going to be Queen and Thin Lizzy. Queen had to cancel, but Thin Lizzy's going to headline. You guys could be the opening act if you have a guitar player. So Sammy turns to me and says, hey, can you do the gig? It's in 2 days. And I said, sure, yeah, I can do it. And so I went home and practiced all this stuff, and did the shows, and we got some nice reviews. And at the end of the shows, I was going to say goodbye to the guys, like, well, thanks for letting me sit in, and maybe, we can work together in the future, whatever. I was saying goodbye. And first I go up to Bill Church, the bass player, and I said, well, it's been great working with you. Thanks a lot. He said, no, 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 you're in the band. And I said, oh, nobody told me. I thought I was just kind of filling in. And so one of the tours that we did almost right away once I joined Sammy's band was to open up for the end of Boston's first tour for their first album. Their manager knew our manager. We did these shows and they liked us. We liked them. And so we opened their entire second tour, like almost every show across the US. So that's when I got to know the guys in Boston. So in 85, when Sammy got the call to join Van Halen, Tom Scholz from Boston called and said, hey, I heard you're out of a gig. Why don't you come back here and help me finish the third album that I'm trying to finish? There's one more song to be recorded. And that was all he was offering at the moment. I said, absolutely, yeah, I'll crawl on my hands and knees to work on a Boston album. So I left from last gig with Sammy, which was Farm Aid 1 in Champaign, Illinois. I flew directly from there to Boston to start working with Tom and Brad. And after a couple of weeks, Tom said, gee, I think we work well together. Again, I had known him for these years, and he said, why don't you move back here? We'll finish this album. Maybe we'll do some tour dates, whatever. And so I've been here 40 years.
See that? So you're never out of a job too long, and you were a free agent and you got picked right up, just like the sports analogy. Well, that's some good stuff. But going back to the Sammy years, I was a kid. I'm 54 now, so that was like I was 7, 8 years old when you joined his band. But his first band was basically Montrose and you, correct? Because you had Bill Church, Alan Fitzgerald, and Denny Carmassi started it off, and then you eventually met David Lauser, which would figure into your future with the Alliance. But you played on 7 studio albums, a few live albums, you toured all over the US, but I think of these albums like Standing Hampton, Three Lock Box, and VOA. These were the ones that put Sammy from popular to really popular to like arena headlining. You think of some of the singles, I Can't Drive 55, There's Only One Way to Rock, Heavy Metal, Three Lock Box, and so many more. But for those albums, I would say, what was your role in the songwriting process with Sammy?
Small. When I joined the band, he said right away, he said, I just want to tell you right up front, I'm the songwriter. That's it. Oh. Now, he did let us contribute. Well, obviously, as we were recording, we just did our own thing. And it was like, well, here's the way the song goes, here are the chords, and we'd work it up and we'd, play our own parts and all that. And certainly when it came time to soloing or whatever, go for it. Some of the albums there, we'd have a dual solo. We'd trade back and forth, and we would do that live in the studio. Usually, Sammy and I would go out in the studio room and say, "Okay, roll the tape," and back and forth. Done. That's it. Because we'd done that so much on stage. We know how to play together. So as far as writing goes, So I got co-writers for one of the songs, and then he split another song between the 4 of us. But again, that was his thing.
Now, were you in any of those videos? And I'd have to refresh myself and go back into some of those videos. Were you in any of those ones that were on MTV?
Absolutely, yeah. I Can't Drive 55. Yeah, people say, you look familiar. Have I seen you in jail somewhere? I said, yeah, that was me in jail with Sammy, and I can't drive 55, and we're fighting the cops and all that kind of stuff. And it
Oh,
was
wow.
a lot of fun for the first couple hours. But then, if you know how videos are made, that's hours and hours of waiting around. They set up the lights and the camera, and they say, "Okay, go do the thing and stop," cut. And then they set up another couple hours. So it took 3 days to make that 3-minute video.
Wow. Now, was there like what was the well, obviously we know the song, but did somebody or Sammy or video director who designed the whole storyline behind that?
Sammy did. That was really his idea, along with the director a bit, Gil. I forget Gil's last name now, but
Yeah.
uh, starts with a B, whatever.
Yeah.
But the story was Sammy, of course, had a couple of nice cars and does drive fast. But he was with his family on a vacation. He was driving a rental station wagon with his family. And of course, those were the days when the federal speed limit was 55. And
Hmm.
so nobody was used to driving 55,
Right.
as on the highway someplace. So he said, I was on this, in some country road out someplace with the family, going from here to there. And he said, I was probably doing like 65 something. And a cop pulls me over, and Sammy says, "Oh man, I can't drive 55." He goes, "Ooh, that could be a good song." So he said he wrote the song on the spot and had it in his mind about what was going to happen for the video.
Wow, that's a cool story. I turned 55 in a couple of months in June, and I told my wife, I said, "That's what I want. I want a shirt that says I can't drive 55." Although I don't drive a sports car, I drive a little small SUV. I'm a family guy, but I think it'll be appropriate for my 2025 year. So, Gary, speaking about being on the road, it's funny. I like to geek out, and there's some great websites where you can look back and say, "Wow, I want to see what shows happened back in the day." So,
Yeah,
just looking at you guys 78, 79, around that period, 80, 81, 82. I mean, obviously, you alluded to the fact that you supported Boston, who was the biggest rock band in the world on the Don't Look Back tour, but you had the Scorpions with you. Early Def Leppard. There was the famous Texas Jams, which had Van Halen, Boston Heart, Blue Oyster Cult, Nazareth, and Sammy Hagar. In the 80s, you toured with Black Sabbath on the Heaven and Hell tour with Ronnie James Dio. Riot was on those shows. And then you supported, or vice versa, ZZ Top on their, I think it's the Eliminator album when they became MTV friendly. And of
yeah,
course, you took out Night Ranger and Crocus. All were bands that kind of came up through you guys. You would have a little history through Night Ranger, but maybe in
yeah,
a general sense, what was life like on the road with Sammy Hagar during this period?
yeah. Sammy Hagar is what you see is what you get. He's always in a good mood, always ready to rock. You meet him, and 5 minutes later, you're his best friend. I mean, that's just the way he is. And so he was our biggest cheer. He said, this could be a great show tonight. Let's go get him. And we go out there and, we would just have a good time. He never let anything get himself down. So it was great. 8 great years of working with him. And he would say, now next year's going to be even better. And it was. Every year we had more record sales and played it for bigger places. And so it was a lot of fun, I got to say. And I still keep in touch with him, and he's still a great guy.
I was going to say that. So you do still have a friendship with him? Speak to him somewhat
Yeah,
regularly?
yeah. When he came through just a little while ago with his band, The Circle,
Yeah.
we went down to see him.
Have you played with him? Got up on stage anytime in the last dozen years or so?
Yes, yes. In fact, he asked me if I wanted to jam this time, but he had Joe Satriani in the band. And I said, "Oh, there's nothing I can do that Joe Satriani can't do 10 times better." That's fine. You don't need me up there. But the previous time he came through town, he had Vic Johnson in the band.
Hmm.
And I'd known Vic, of course. And I said, yeah, me and Vic will play. And Sammy said, yeah, here, you take my guitar. And so I took Sammy's guitar, and we played a couple of old Sammy songs.
That's so cool. That's so cool. You got to get on the invite list for one of his Cabo birthday parties. That might be a nice destination for you,
I've
right?
been there. I'm in some videos there for those too.
Oh, okay. So you have done some of the Cabo trips. That's so cool.
Was there
Now
for
it's funny. I was thinking back to those Sammy days in the 70s, and I remember like, the Trans Am song, and then, he was also at that point where he was like climbing up stage scaffolding and stuff like that in the old videos. Like, were you right there with him, or were you down at the bottom kind of looking up, making sure he's not falling off and breaking your amps?
Yeah. No, yeah, he was crazy. He would climb up the side of the scaffolds, and nobody knew that he was going to do that. And he didn't even know. He was just like, "Hey, I'm going to climb up the side of this PA and run across the scaffolding." It's like crazy stuff. He was fearless.
Yeah.
And we never knew what he would do on stage. Like I'd be doing a solo when he would be singing, right? So he doesn't have a guitar on, so I'm taking a solo. He'd come up behind me and like put his arms around me, like, "Hey, wait, I'm trying to play," or try to push me off the front of the stage, like almost. So we never knew what he was going to do, but always in good fun.
It's great. Well, you could say you're immortalized on all those live albums and that kind of thing. So you have a period of time. So I want to touch base a little bit about your Boston tenure, but I wanted you to just comment really quickly on the Night Ranger piece because, there's rumors that persist that during the late 70s, early 80s, you may have been around these guys for some of the early demo and jam sessions. And I know that's probably a close knit community in that Northern California area, but set the record straight on your involvement with Jack Blades and Brad Gillis and those guys.
Right. So Alan Fitzgerald, alias Fitz, was the keyboard player of Sammy's band, right? So that's when I got to know him, met him. He left to start his own band. I'll cut through the chase, but anyway, but we did know of Jack Blades and Kelly Kagi, and I went to see them because Ronnie Montrose had told me that they were putting a band together and they needed somewhere to record demos. And I had a little recording studio in my house. And so I'd have some of my friends come over and make demos just for free, just because I enjoyed helping my other friends record demos. So anyway, Alan was putting together this band. And again, because he was in Montrose and Ronnie knew these guys, Jack Blades and all that, so they formed Night Ranger. And they recorded their first demos in my living room, one of which was Sister Christian.
Wow. So what was that? What was the demo like that? Was it done the way it is that we hear it on radio, or was it maybe done on an acoustic guitar or anything you remember from that?
Yeah, it was pretty close to what it was. And I still had the tapes up until a couple of months ago. I finally sent them out to Kelly because I'd kept them all these years. I said, if you guys ever want these tapes, let me know. I still have them. And finally, Kelly said, yeah, send them out to me. You never know what I'll do with them. They're demos. They're not quite as well recorded as the albums. But in essence, the arrangements were there. And of course, there were some songs that I recorded on their demos that aren't on any of the albums. And they said, yeah, maybe we'll put those as bonus tracks on something, in the future.
Well, that's always, fans like they like to buy stuff. And when there's reissues or box sets or a certain career milestone, that's what fans like me look for, those unknowns, those nuggets. So, well, I know if we ever, see if that demo ever sees the light of day, we know it came from you. But that's cool stuff, Gary. So, moving on to Boston, you said Sammy joins Van Halen. Tom calls you. You had history from touring together. He asks you to be in the band. You say, yes, I'm on a plane. I'm coming over. But I remember around this time, it was like major news. I was only 16 or so at the time, but it's still mind-boggling to think that Boston, as big as they were up until then, only put out 2 studio albums, right? But then they come back in release Third Stage, and the hit Amanda was all over the radio, all over MTV. So let's say coming out of working with Sammy, like what were your impressions working with not just Tom, but Brad Delp?
Well, again, because we had done all that touring together with them on the road, so I knew them. And I had kept in touch with Tom and Brad a bit over the years. Tom specifically because he started his own electronics company, the Rockman company, where he made first off the small Rockman device that about the size of a sandwich. And you plug your guitar in and have headphones, and it sounds like you're in a stadium, full distortion and echo and all that. So he invented that, and a lot of hit records were made with that. ZZ Top, Def Leppard, Jeff Beck, Paul McCartney goes on and on and on about people who have used a Rockman to record songs with for their albums. And so I had gone to a NAMM show, that's the National Association of Music Merchandisers, for Tom to demonstrate that. Tom said, hey, would you come down and help me demonstrate this at one of these trade shows? And it's only open to music store owners and buyers, not open to the public. So I went down there with Tom, and we would demonstrate these products. And so because he knew that I had an electronics background, and that's the other reason we kind of got to know each other, because he had, of course, this great pedal board that he had made, and I would always be asking, what's that? What does that do? How'd you get that sound here? What's this? And so we would talk electronics together. And so we had that affinity too. So it was, that's kind of how I got started with that end of things.
Wow. I mean, joining a big band like Boston, I mean, and again, after a hiatus, it was like, again, big news, but I know they were known at the time in the 70s for these big elaborate tours, big stage things. Like what was it like you joining into this band, like this big sonic landscape that would existed? And that tour, I remember 1987 into 88, that was all the rage. Like, you have any favorite memories from that tour or just being out on the road?
Oh yeah. uh, so of course the second album came out in 78. The next album, the third stage album that I was on, came out in 86. That's 8 years later. I mean,
Yeah.
just think of some kid that had gone through high school and college between
Right.
albums. I mean, that's a long time. Like Andy Warhol said, we're only entitled to 15 minutes of fame, right?
Right. Right.
So, so Tom had no idea if we'd have any fans at all. And so, he finished the album and said, well, I'd like to do some shows, maybe a dozen or so, if people come to see us. He said, I don't know, I have no idea. Well, of course, as it turned out, Amanda went to #1. The album went to #1. It was the biggest tour that band had ever done. We sold out all these places. We set records. We spent 9 nights here at the Worcester Centrum. I mean, it was crazy. We had no idea it was going to be that big. But leading up to that, again, we weren't quite sure. And we were all using the new equipment that Tom had, again, just designed. And we think about that, Boston's the only band in the world that uses amplifiers on stage that he has invented. I mean, what other band does that,
Right.
So anyways, so we got all this brand new gear that he's just invented. And I, of course, started working at the electronics company with him because I knew some electronics. And we got all the gear. We brought our crew guys in, and they'd never seen anything like this before. They had no idea how it worked. It didn't look like a regular amp, with the volume, treble, middle, bass, controls. It was all these little blue boxes with sliders and faders and stuff. And the crew guys had no idea. So, only Tom and I did. So we'd have to show them how it's all set up. And we had miles of cable to make things all work together. And instead of using speakers on stage that you would then put a microphone in front of to, amplify that for the PA, everything went direct. So again, it's like the first time anybody, or certainly any large band, had ever done this before. So we're really breaking some ground here. And we're, months and months in the rehearsal hall trying to get it all work, lining up a new band because the other guys had left. And so we got Dave Sykes on bass, Tug Huffman on drums, Brad and Tom and me. And trying to get it all together, get all the sounds correct for all the albums. And we were supposed to do 4 warm-up shows before our first big show, which was a Texas Jam. I'd done 4 Texas Jams already with Sammy, so I knew,
Right.
it's like the Cotton Bowl, whatever, 80,000 people or something, And so I knew what those were all about. So we were going to do like 4 warm-up shows before that. So, okay, great. But we weren't ready. The stuff wasn't working right. We're, in rehearsal, we canceled the first 3 warm-up dates. And now we got one show. It was in Rochester, New York. And we're going, oh man, I hope all this stuff works. Because as we would rehearse, we'd be playing along and we'd stop in the middle, say, oh, this isn't right, change this. We never played the set all the way through without stopping. That's, oh, got to fix this, change this, get a chord, plug this in, And so we get there and, I'm crossing my fingers like, oh my God, I hope this works, And so Tom gave us the pep talk before we go on stage. We're going to get out there. We're going to rock. And it doesn't matter if things break down. We're just going to keep rocking. It doesn't matter. Just let's go. Yeah, yeah. So we all run out on stage and everything worked perfectly. And I'll tell you, I got a lump in my throat. I look over at my crew guy and we're going, man, it's working. That was, I got to say, the highlight of my career.
Oh, man, that's a big accomplishment, and then to take that whole show out. But it's nice. I'm looking over your left shoulder. It looks like you have the album. With is that a platinum album plaque behind you?
Yeah, yeah. That's third stage. I think went triple, and I've got some Sammy albums over there that went gold and platinum, and then the other Boston albums as well that I was on
Yeah,
Walk. It's kind of thing. So yeah, that's my life there behind me.
yeah,
Those gold.
exactly. Yeah. Now, again, moving past third stage. I mean, yes, you put out three more albums, three more studio albums, and then of course there was the untimely death of Brad Delp. You had a couple other guys coming in, including Michael Sweet from Stryper did some vocals for you guys as well. But it's funny in looking at the duration between the albums and then knowing that you're a gearhead, a guitar guy, Tom is too. I mean, is that one of the reasons that maybe things took so long with him? Is he was like meticulous to a fault? Why there would be 6, 7 years between albums?
Well, he's certainly a perfectionist, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Uh, so he just wants to hear all the possibilities. It's not that he's slow, but he just wants to hear everything. Like, let's try this, and maybe this is better, maybe that's. And he said he'll work on a song for months and then throw it away and say it's just not good enough. So
Mm.
that's and the way he works. He'll just keep on going and keep trying until he's happy with it.
Now, the big magic question is there a future for Boston, and what will your role be in it? And do you and Tom talk sort of what's next?
Uh, he's always working on songs, and just as in the past, he'll work on a song and then he'll call me in or one of the other guys to play their parts or whatever, and then he'll work on that alone in the studio and fix things and change things around and all that. And so I'm hoping there will be another album and tour. Of course, next year will be the 50th anniversary of the first album. So I'm hoping that there will be a tour for that, but we'll just have to wait and see. No official word yet.
So, Gary, this was great on your backstory, but the reason you're on the show today is really to talk about the new Alliance album, Before Our Eyes. So it's a good one, but I need to go into the back history of this band too. So I guess with your, let's say, downtime around the Boston era, you started forming this band. You had the history with David Lauser from Sammy Hagar. So Alliance was formed in 1993. So again, the second set the record straight, it's you, David, and bassist vocalist Robert Berry, who's best known for his time in GTR as well as Three, which was an offshoot of Emerson, Lake and Palmer. So maybe tell us about the origins of the group. How did you guys come together, and what was your initial vision for the band?
So in 1985, I was in Sammy Hagar's band with Dave Lauser, and Sammy got the call from Van Halen, and he said, "Oh, it's an offer I can't refuse. But look, you guys are the best band in the world. You're the best backup band I've ever had. All you got to do is get another singer and keep on going." And we were on Geffen Records at the time, and so they tried to connect us with some other people. At least they started to. And one of those was Robert Berry, that they had known, again, through Keith Emerson and those bands. But as it happened, I got the call from Tom Scholz. And as I say, I left from our last gig with Sammy, went directly to Boston. So I wasn't able to put that band together with the other guys. As it turned out, our keyboard player at the time, Jesse Harms, went to play with David Lee Roth, of all people, talk about small world.
Yeah.
Uh, but Dave Lauser had met Robert Berry at that point, and so they talked about putting the band together. So I joined Boston. We do the big tour. Tom says, it's going to take a few years to make the next record. If any of you guys want to do anything else, solo albums or whatever, now's the time. Go do it. And so I called up Dave Lauser and Alan Fitzgerald for keys. Again, he had played with me and Sammy's band, and then Chris went on to form Night Ranger. So then, well, those two guys, and then Dave said, "Hey, and I met this guy, Robert Barry. He's great." So that's how that was formed. So Alan Fitzgerald, played on the first few Alliance records with us, but then he basically retired from music. He's not even playing anymore. But
Okay.
so that was the core of that band, the four of us as Alliance.
Yeah. And what was the vision of the band? Because like I can say, you look at it. I mean, this is your seventh album, I believe, but you had six albums spread out over like a 30-year period. I mean, like in a sense, was your vision that this was only really supposed to be like a studio project, like not a live band? And why so long between albums? It's just because other people have other stuff going on?
That's exactly right. So we would love to do some live shows, but again, Dave had gone back and forth with Sammy to help him with his other solo projects,
Yeah.
and then certainly when he left Van Halen, Dave joined Sammy's band again as the Wobberitos, and so
Yeah.
he was doing that. Bill Church had gone off to do other stuff, but Robert Barry has his own studio, and so he was busy. And certainly me with Boston, all the touring that we had done, uh, that we just didn't have time to make records
Mhm.
faster and or tour with them. But we would love to because we certainly all enjoy playing. And again, I had played with Dave and Fitz live with Sammy's band, so we knew we could rock together. And
Right.
Robert's great on stage. The other band that we actually play and that we do perform around the holidays is something that Robert had put together called December People, which is a charity band that he had formed where you play traditional holiday songs, but in the styles of classic rock bands. So we do something that
Okay.
sounds like ZZ Top, da, 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 da. You better watch out, you better not cry, Santa Claus is coming to town, and we do a song that starts acoustic guitar, ching, 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 ching. Sounds like the Who and Pinball Wizard, but it's joy to the world, the Lord is God. So it's all Christmas songs, but sounding like classic rock bands. And every show we do is a benefit for a local charity, usually a food bank. So
Okay.
again, the three of us plus some other guys do that.
Where are those shows performed? What area of the country?
California, because that's where all the other guys live. So
Okay. Good. Well, that sounds pretty cool. And I see,
it's a lot
Gary,
of
you got quite the pipes. You can sing too.
fun. No, I can do backup.
Okay. Okay.
Robert's a singer, and so I'll leave it up to him. He sounds great. But live,
Okay.
yeah, I'm there, singing all the Alliance stuff, and of course with December People, they let me sing the one that sounds like George Thorogood. All I want for Christmas is my two front teeth.
That's cool. I love that. I'd love to hear that someday. That sounds like a
Yeah.
fun night out. But let's get into the new album. So Before Our Eyes, it's 11 songs. So Gary, why I was drawn to, you know, listening to the album and getting in touch with you to talk about it is, again, I grew up in the MTV era, like early 80s, and there's a certain warmth and familiar throwback feel to the music, yet it's fresh, in my opinion. And it just reminds me of some of the stuff that was out there in MTV in the early to mid 80s, where they were like simple yet solid, catchy, and melodic rock songs. It reminds me so much of that stuff. So, for this new album, the question to you is like, how would you describe the sound you set out to achieve on the songs?
Well, in Europe, and of course our album is on Frontiers Records. They're from
Right.
Italy, and so they call this melodic rock. They
Yeah.
over there they really separate the different styles of music with a name to them. So yeah, that's what we are. We're melodic rock, whether we knew it or not. That's what we are. To us it's just rock. But no, it's melodic rock. Anyway, but yeah, that's the stuff that we grew up on. Those are the songs, thanks to classic rock radio, still get played. My kids will say, "Oh, gee, I heard this great new song by Jimi Hendrix or Cream or something, and Led Zeppelin." I said, "That's what I listened to when I was your age." And I was like, "Where are you hearing that?" "Oh, classic rock radio." I'm like, so yeah, that kind of sound is timeless. So
Yeah.
we're stuck in the melodic rock era, whether we knew it or not.
Well, but but again, I think it goes past because there's a lot of subgenres of melodic rock, and we know Frontiers well. We do a lot of promoting for them, and there's all different types of melodic rock. So we got to come up with a new subgenre for you guys: melodic, vintage, classic, throwback, AOR, radio, FM style rock, or something like that. We'll come up with a new one. I'll make
Yeah.
sure I tell John Freeman that. But
Yeah.
Gary, another thing, an
No, just call
observation on the
it.
what's that?
Sorry, I was going to say I'll just call it Alliance Rock.
There you go, Alliance Rock. That's fun. A funny
Yeah.
story about Alliance. In my real job, I'm an alliance manager, so it makes sense. So we're aligned in a certain way with names. So just in a different
Oh, that's
industry.
great.
So, but Gary, your
Yeah.
guitar work. This is another thing I observed that I liked was it's quite adept and diverse on the album. Yet I feel like the songs don't require you to shred away at like lightning speed. It's not what the songs need. And again, this is quite refreshing because I hear so much variety in your playing. So, just how did you approach the guitar work?
Well, that's just me. One of the things I have done is to build my own amplifiers that I use for recording. I didn't want to use the sound that I use with Boston. That's the Boston sound. I mean, you hear the first couple notes of a Boston song, you hear that guitar sound. It's like that's Boston. Well, I don't want to do that for Alliance. I want my own sound. So I built my own tube amps, and that's what I use for the record. And same thing with, as we say about the sound of the songs. Yeah, that's my style is more like the classic rock stuff. It's not a million notes per hour. Like that's just not me. And so, like on one of the songs, I think it's Too Many People, I do actually two solos. The first one, I use a Strat. I don't know if you're familiar with the sound, but it's clean, clear, kind of sounds a little bit like Hendrix, I wish. But it's got that cleaner kind of sound. And then right after that, I do another solo that uses a fuzz tone. It's like the Robert Barry had it. I said, "Oh, I want to use that." He had it in the studio, right? I said, "I got to use that." And it's one of those old green ones called fuzz tone, and it was the
Okay.
one that Keith Richards used. Satisfaction. It's
Uh-huh.
that sound. I'm going for all the sounds that I used to know and love and trying to incorporate those. And other sounds, like there was another song where I wanted the solo to be backwards. In the old
Oh.
days, we actually did that. We flipped the tape over, try to record and try to play along with the tape, because you hear the drums go, you're not quite sure where you are in the song, and then play that back and it would sound backwards to the rest of the track. Of course, the Beatles did that back in the
Yeah.
60s and all that. These days, when you're recording on a computer, you just hit the button that says reverse.
What
But you
song is
still
that on
have
the
to
album?
figure out.
Did,
I can't remember the song. You can hear it on there, but
was it maybe
you
Good Life? Good Life possibly? Because there's like there's some synthesizer passages in that one that I think like and that's the one track I see in the album that there's a lot of guitar variety in that work, and yet it all seems to come together.
It could be I'm blanking on all the names of all the songs, but the point is you have to think ahead because you're starting backwards. You're starting at the end, and then it goes to the beginning. So you have to know that where you're going with it in reverse. But again, it's a lot of fun to throw those things in there.
Yeah, it's a good sonic listening. Like I even go to the top of the album, your single and video tell somebody. It's a perfect choice to kick off the album. The video's cool because there's kind of a teenager spray painting graffiti on a city wall. So I don't know. The title sort of suggests a sense of frustration or acceptance in whatever. So like, what emotions were conveyed? What were you guys trying to convey in the message of this song?
We try to write songs that have a positive message on all of them. And so, dare I say, the world seems crazy at times, but it always has.
Yeah,
I'm sure you could say the same thing when you were growing up as a teenager and then, in your 20s. There's always something crazy going on in the world.
sure.
And so that's what we usually try to acknowledge. Like there's always something going on, but we try to have a positive attitude about it, but also to tell somebody, tell people how you're feeling about it, or it's okay that you're feeling bad about this. We're here with you. It's the camaraderie thing. So I hope that's what comes across.
Yeah, it's a good track, and it sticks. It's a memorable one. It sticks with you. You're humming it all day. Actually, a lot of the tracks, even Nothing Will Make You Change, like that's the second track. This one is even, it's so bright, so melodic and upbeat. Like to me, like if there was going to be a song on FM radio, this would be it. And then that subtle guitar solo and Robert's bass playing, they just complement each other so well.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah. Robert is such a great bassist, but he's also a terrific guitar player, drummer, and keyboard player. He does it all.
Okay. Okay. So a song like Face of Justice, right? This one's a rocking song, but I hear a lot of different stuff on this one. There's slide guitar, there's some harmonica. Is there maybe a banjo in there? So it seems like you guys went outside the box for this track.
Yes, that's me playing harmonica,
Okay.
Robert playing banjo, and me playing slide guitar.
Okay. Okay. So,
And again, it's just all the influences that we'd had growing up. And gee, I think this will work. Let's try this in here. And I got to say, our drummer, Dave Lauser, sometimes tells me what to play. He'll say, "Oh, it needs a big chord like blang right here." And I go, "Okay, great, let's try that." And so people say, "What? You have the drummer tell you how to play guitar?" And yes, because if he comes up with a good idea, I'm glad to do it. So that's one great thing about the band. Like no ego involved. I don't mind the drummer telling me how to play guitar.
well, that sounds like also it must be that you guys are actually spending some time together versus trading everything over the computer.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, we always get together at Robert's studio in San Jose. That's where we record. So we'll come
Yeah.
in with ideas and then throw them down like, here, how about this? I'll try this. And again, Dave, our drummer, is a great arranger. He'll say, oh no, that shouldn't be the verse. That should be the chorus. The other part, that's the verse. So we'll mix and match stuff right there on the spot. One of the songs we did, we had the ideas like, okay, I got this guitar riff, and Robert said, I got some lyrics, and Dave says, I think I got a groove that'll work with that. We're in the studio, and so Dave says, Robert, roll the tape. I'm gonna, go play drums. Gary, you play along with me. We'll just work. We played that song, so we wrote that 4-minute song in 4 minutes.
Wow. See that? See that? And it certainly, you would think it would take you weeks or time or months or whatever, but look, sometimes the magic just happens. So I'm always curious when you speak to veteran bands, like, is there a writing process? Like, does the music come together and then the lyrics and the singing come over, or are there any lyrics and verses already prepared and then you write the music around it, or is it a little bit of both?
It's both. It's all those things. Sometimes I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I'll have a guitar riff in my mind, or a vocal line, or some words, or something like. So it could be anything. It's wrong. He'll just have some lyrics. Dave, the same way, he'll have a lyric idea, and then I think I wanted to go like this, and he'll sing something. He's not the best singer, but he'll go, and we'll say, okay, I know what you're trying to do. Hey, let's go with this. So yeah, for all of us, it's just whatever comes to us.
Oh, that's pretty cool. There's a lot of good material on this album. I'm not gonna lie. Songs like "Can't Stop Messin'," that's a heavier, bluesier track, like a kind of little down tuned or whatever you want to call it, but a big ripping solo. Again, that's one where I go, "Wow, listen to Gary on that one." And then you have "A Bone to Chew On," where again it's got like a bluesy feel, but there's a bit of a groove and a stomp to it. Like I call it a stomp, and then there's a hey, hey, this little chant. There's some strings layered in there, so and even the lyrics are good on that one. So, what about those tracks? Any memories of those?
Yes, Can't Stop Messing, that's Dave Lauser's song. Again, he
Okay.
came in with that and sang it to the best of his ability. And of course, Robert did a great job. And so we all bring slightly different backgrounds that we have. Dave grew up playing in R&B bands in Southern California, where he was sometimes the only white guy in the band.
Mhm.
So he knows how to groove. And so he loves that blues stuff. I'm from Chicago. So people say, oh, you're a Chicago blues guy. Well, no, I was 10, so I wasn't
Right.
hanging out in clubs, at that age. But I heard a lot of, obviously, blues on the radio and country stuff as well. Robert, of course, was into the prog rock thing. Obviously work with Keith Emerson, Carl Palmer, and
Yep.
GTR. So we all have a little different something that we're coming from, and we just throw that in because that's who we are.
Yeah, it makes for a nice, complete body of work, I've got to tell you.
I'll say one quick thing. As I was taking lessons from Jerry Garcia in his little studio, over in the corner, there was a banjo. And of course, I'm thinking, banjo, that's not very rock and roll. I said, whose banjo is that? And he goes, oh, that's mine. I said, you play that? He says, oh, yeah, bluegrass, blah, blah, blah. And it really opened my eyes like, wow, I guess you can play anything. It doesn't, you can play anything. It's just good. If it's good music, it's good music.
I know you commented on that on the Garcia thing, but now you're making me think of other questions. Like, how many lessons did you take with Jerry? And did you ever, meet him 20 years later and go to a show and be like, hey, I was one of those kids you taught?
I never met him again. We only took a few lessons because, whatever, they changed their name to the Grateful Dead and they went off and he stopped giving lessons,
Yeah.
But
How about
I never got to meet him again to say, hey, I was one of those guys,
Yeah, how about a photo? Did you get a photo from that session?
No, I'm afraid not.
Yeah. Oh, well, but it's a great memory and a unique story. So, Gary, this has been an awesome hour of talking about your history here. So the new album is out now on Frontiers Records. But, before I let you go, aside from the Alliance and, your work in the studio and your own equipment, for you personally, what keeps you motivated and inspired after so many decades in the music industry to want to keep doing this?
Well, I got to say, certainly performing live is a great treat because people would ask us, well, do you get tired of playing the same songs like More Than a Feeling or whatever on stage after all these years? So, well, I would if I just had to sit in my living room and play the songs. But you get up on stage, there's 10,000 people out there smiling and singing along, and there's just no bigger thrill than that, So that's what keeps me motivated. And then, of course, to work with my other buddies like Robert and Dave on new music that we just love playing. There's no agenda whatsoever. Like, it's not like we got to write a song that fits this niche or something. We're just going to write whatever the heck we feel like it. And so that's just so much fun for us. And as I say, we all get together in one room and do it. And, we've known each other all these years. We're just best of friends. And so that's fun just to do that.
Yeah, well, that's good. Well, we look forward to not just the success of this album, but hopefully more material for Alliance to come down the line. So we wish you best of luck with you, Robert, and David on the album. So for more information on Gary Pihl and Alliance, head over to alliance.band for all of their information and their links to their socials. So, Gary, appreciate your time today. For my guest, Gary Pihl, I'm Metal Walt, and this has been Metal Mayhem ROC.
Metal for life.
Thank you for listening to Metal Mayhem ROC. Check out our website at metalmayhemroc.com for information on podcasts, archives, links to all our live radio shows, and all sorts of info. Please like, follow, and share with everyone, even your non-metal friends. And always remember to keep it heavy.